Fear of the Dark is the most controversial Iron Maiden album, with some fans shamelessly calling it a low-effort record and others considering Fear of the Dark a climax of the Iron Maiden's golden era.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Released on the 11th of May 1992, Fear of the Dark became the 9th studio album by the legendary English heavy metal band Iron Maiden. And so, as a part of our Up the Iron series, let's first of all take a look at some of the most interesting facts about Fear of the Dark, discuss why so many fans actually hate it so much, and then hopefully answer the question how Fear of the Dark might have actually saved Iron Maiden's career. Here you go. Very quick before we start, just to point out the obvious, if you wonder what kind of an amazing heavy metal background I have in this video, it is actually a basement of a 400-year-old building here in Lviv, Ukraine. And the only reason I am sitting here is to not get interrupted while recording by the air sirens. So please continue supporting Ukraine, and of course, as always, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of the Up the Iron series is of course to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it. Most Iron Maiden fans of course know Fear of the Dark as the last album released with Bruce Dickinson on vocals before him leaving the band. Yet it is by far not the only distinctive thing about it. In fact, Fear of the Dark is the album of firsts and lasts, and interestingly enough, it is mostly the firsts which make it a turning point record for the band. It is the very first Iron Maiden album to be produced by the band's founder, Steve Harris, at his newly established Barnyard home studios, making it the very first double LP by the band and the first time Iron Maiden would tap into the world of power ballads. By the way, speaking about Wasting Love, 30 years later, I honestly still do not understand how someone could have thought that it would be a good idea to release it as a single to promote the album.
This guy is getting wasted in terms of himself because of all the stuff that all the guilt he's laid on himself, you know, going to bed with all these people.
Because yes, in my opinion, Wasting Love is the most boring Iron Maiden song in the entire discography. Even more so than this one.
Don't you think I'm a savior? Don't you think I could save you?
12 hours later.
Don't you think I could save your life?
And yet, most importantly, despite it being the second album to feature Yannick Gers on guitars, it is the first one on which he has received a writing credit, and this, I believe, is the main reason why it is so much better than its predecessor. After Adrian Smith's departure from Iron Maiden, Yannick Gers stepped in, yet by that time it was of course already too late to contribute for No Prayer for the Dying. Yet when it comes to Fear of the Dark, he was already long enough in the band to feel comfortable to contribute to the record. And in my opinion, it is actually the Gers songs which saved this album from being a disappointment.
The sound of this album is really 90s.
For even though my personal favorite tracks from Fear of the Dark are the ones written by the Harris-Dickinson-Murray triangle, including of course the title track, it is the songs like Be Quick or Be Dead which helped Fear of the Dark to not become an album full of fillers in between the masterpieces. By the way, don't you think it's kind of ironic that the very first time Iron Maiden decided to tap into the world of kind of thrash metal is exactly a year after this song was released? By the way, that intro piece is of course not the only thing which connects Fear of the Dark album with thrash metal, for it became the very first political album by Iron Maiden, and it is of course mostly evident not only on the opening track but also on such songs as Afraid to Shoot Strangers, written by Steve Harris, which Bruce Dickinson has said multiple times is an anti-war song.
Sadly, this song is curiously topical at the moment. Make of that what you will. The song is called Afraid to Shoot Strangers.
By the way, I personally believe that it is the songs like Afraid to Shoot Strangers, solely written by Steve Harris, which are a clear indication of where Iron Maiden's founder was going to take a band on their next endeavor.
Afraid to shoot strangers, afraid. Afraid to shoot strangers, afraid.
Which, of course, at that point, no one was even sure was going to happen. We all of course know that in 1993 Bruce Dickinson left Iron Maiden to concentrate on his solo endeavor.
I had wings that couldn't fly where I was.
Yet he might actually not have been the only one who was going to end a career in the band. According to Steve Harris, by 1992 he was so exhausted and out of ideas for Iron Maiden that if he would legally able to do that, he would actually have ended Iron Maiden as a project. And this was of course not only due to the rise of grunge and other external factors which put the pressure on such bands as Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, but also due to the internal processes which actually have started in Iron Maiden all the way back after World Slavery Tour. In our Somewhere in Time episode, which by the way, if you haven't seen, the link is right here and I encourage you to check it out right after this episode, we've spoke about how after extensive World Slavery Tour the band was so freaking exhausted that some band members, including of course Bruce Dickinson, wanted to take a little break for a while. And it is back then when the first major disagreements between Bruce Dickinson and other band members occurred, as he was pushing everyone to slow down a notch and release an acoustic album, yet they simply rejected all of his ideas and said that he was utterly crazy, simply due to the fact that they thought that what Iron Maiden fans wanted was pure heavy metal.
Do you want heavy?
And of course, even though since then they released two amazing albums and No Prayer for the Dying, tensions continue to grow, and given the fact that Adrian Smith left the band and Bruce Dickinson already tasted the blood of his solo career, it is absolutely clear that the atmosphere in the band was already not the same as it used to be. And what is also very interesting to point out that on this album, there is not even one song which was co-written by the band's founder Steve Harris and the vocalist Bruce Dickinson.
Yes, it's just outrageous.
So I think it is safe to assume that by the time when the band went to the recording session for this album, the two drifted so far apart that I don't believe that they actually spoke to each other much.
Spend your days full of emptiness.
And by the way, I'm not gonna go into the details of why Bruce Dickinson left the band and what he did during his solo career, but if you would like an episode on such matter, please do let me know in the comments. Yet what I believe is absolutely clear is that given the fact that two of the band's pillars were absolutely out of creative ideas for Iron Maiden, and also enforced by the fact that the band's longtime producer Morten Birch was going on retirement and it would be his last album produced with Iron Maiden, Fear of the Dark was supposed to be the last big bang for one of the greatest heavy metal bands to ever exist. Yet instead, it just opened the doors to a new chapter in the band's career. Fear of the Dark is of course the very first Iron Maiden album for which the album artwork was not provided by the one and only legendary Derek Riggs. Yet instead Rod Smallwood and Steve Harris decided to commission an artist, Melvin Grunt. By the way, according to Rod Smallwood, the band began accepting contributions from other artists because they simply wanted to update the artwork just like they thought they updated the Iron Maiden sound to better suit the mood of the time, which in plain English means to increase the sales among the melancholic grunge kids. Yet still, I personally believe that that artwork is absolutely stunning, and I absolutely love Grant's Eddie, especially since it fits so well with the overall mood of the record.
Fear of the Dark, Santiago!
By the way, since we're talking about visual elements of Fear of the Dark, an interesting fact: Nico McBrain in 1973 played together with the guitarist Golden Giltrap, who in 1978 also released an album called Fear of the Dark, and whose logo font is very much resembling of that of Iron Maiden. But still, instead of being the last Iron Maiden album, Fear of the Dark actually gave a new life to Eddie, with Grant eventually becoming the second most frequently commissioned artist for Iron Maiden. Alright, so what about Fear of the Dark? Is it really a bad album? Well, I don't actually think so. Let's not forget that such bands as Iron Maiden, Judas Priest and Black Sabbath are mostly in competition with themselves rather than with other bands in the genre. And therefore, if Fear of the Dark, even in 1992, would have been released by a different band, it would have received as a masterpiece most likely. Yet there are a couple of things which stop me personally from considering it a great Iron Maiden album, and maybe even a good Iron Maiden album. Number one is Bruce's vocals, which in their attempt to sound darker to fit the moods of time, in reality actually sounded somewhat like if Bruce was trying to imitate Paul Di'Anno. And maybe that's why the tracks on which Bruce would stick to his operatic approach to vocal techniques are actually some of the best ones on this record. And number two, which bothers me so much, is the album's inconsistency. Despite given the fact that all of the songs on Fear of the Dark actually have a similar mood, they are in fact very different in their nature. And I would actually go as far as saying that it actually sounds less like an album and more like a compilation of songs which didn't make it on previous records. And so this is my personal problem with Fear of the Dark, and I would actually even go as far as consider it a weak album if it wasn't one of the most important records in the band's history. Fear of the Dark, despite being full of filler tracks. By the way, I have a little coming out here to do. For some reason, I actually absolutely love Chains of Misery, and I think it's an absolute shame that the band never played Judas Be My Guide live. Anyways, despite all that, it has one jam which might have actually saved Iron Maiden's career later on in the 2000s. Its title track. Yes, I firmly believe that if Iron Maiden would just simply have released No Prayer for the Dying and then a Fear of the Dark album without its final track, even more possibly if it wouldn't be the one closing the record, Iron Maiden simply would not have had that opportunity to triumphantly return in 1999 with their longtime vocalist Bruce Dickinson. Yet with the record and with that track particularly, Iron Maiden were able to end their first era of the band's existence, well, technically the second one, with a big hit and big bang which would later on allow Bruce Dickinson to return as a knight in a shining armor on a white horse. Another thing which makes it an album of firsts, it was actually my personal first Iron Maiden album that I fell in love with. But anyways, what do you guys personally think about Fear of the Dark, the album and the song? Is it worth to be considered a gem of the golden era, or is it simply a mediocre release which should never have happened? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for sticking with me, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!